Hey, Herb, it's Jeremy. I just wanted to do a quick sound check.
You're very good, very loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me come back in one last second, just dawned on me. Alex, Jeremy has informed us a few hours ago that there's been an emergency in Michelle Curran's family, so she will not be attending this meeting today. So at those points in the script where you call on Jeremy and Michelle, you can just call on Jeremy. If you say Michelle, that's fine. But Michelle will not be attending today's meeting, and Jeremy will, on his own, do those presentations. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good afternoon. My name is Gregory Longini. I'm the Secretary to the Chicago Transit Board. On November 10th, 2020, Chicago Transit Board office issued a notice of change format of committee and transit board meetings scheduled for November 18th, 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker issued a disaster proclamation on October 16th, 2020 to address this emergency. Section 12 of the proclamation declares that no in-person attendance of more than 50 people is not feasible in light of public health concerns. This means that Chicago Transit Authority public meetings occurring on November 18th, 2020 will take place only virtually. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's Executive Order 2020-07 as extended by his Executive Order 2020-37, as well as Illinois Attorney General guidance for public bodies on the Open Meetings Act and the Freedom of Information Act during the COVID-19 pandemic, allow for public bodies to hold public meetings electronically to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. We are now able to start the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee meeting. I turn this over to Chairman Alejandro Silva.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I would like to call to order the November 18, 2020 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes. Director Irvine.
Here.
Director Chevrolet.
Here.
Director Jakes.
Here.
Director Miller.
Yeah.
Director Miller. Director Gonzalez.
Here.
Chairman Silva.
Here.
We have a quorum with 6 members of the committee present. Let the record also show that General Counsel Karen Simons and President Dorval Carter are also attending this meeting, and actually also that both of them and myself are in the building at 567 West Lake Street. So we may proceed to agenda item number 2, Chairman.
Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of October 21st, 2020. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Director Jakes,
Second.
seconded by Director Irvine. I'll now take a roll call vote. Director Irvine,
Yes.
Director Chevrolet,
Yes.
Director Jakes,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Alvaro Rosales,
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
Minutes are approved with 6 yes votes, sir. We may proceed to agenda item number 3.
Our next order of business is the finance report. Jeremy Fine.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'll be presenting the results for September and year-to-date numbers. Next page, please. With regard to September revenues, we continue to see downward pressure on our farebox revenues as well as passes, where we see those down about $20 million for farebox, about 15 for passes. So overall, fare and pass totals down about $35 million for the month of September. We see reduced fare subsidy coming in at budget, and we see non-farebox totals, which again includes advertising and the like, down about $2.6 million. So overall, we see the month of September coming in with a negative variance to budget of $37.7 million, which was where we were for August as well, just as a point of reference. Again, the CARES funding, which we'll talk more about in a moment, is a critical lifeline to offset the shortfalls that we're seeing here on our system-generated revenues as well as our public funding, which we'll also talk about in a moment. Next page. Year-to-date numbers follow a similar trend where we see farebox and pass totals down in aggregate about $250 million. Reduced fare subsidy coming in at budget. Non-farebox totals down about 19. So overall, we're down about $270 million on a year-to-date basis for our system-generated revenues. Next page. And then with regard to our September expenses, we continue to do a great job with the assistance of the departments of controlling our expenses. We see material and labor slightly positive, but essentially flat for the month of September. Fuel and power continue to be good performers for us, attaining over $1 million in aggregate between those two lines of favorability. And then injuries and damages and security services coming in flat or slightly favorable. Another line item that's continuing to do well for us is other expenses, and we're positive by about $2.7 million for the month of September. So overall, we see a favorability for September expenses to the tune of about $4 million. That helps offset a portion of the shortfall that we saw on system-generated revenues. So we end up September net about $34 million unfavorable to budget. Next page, please. On a year-to-date basis, similar trajectory on the various lines, but I'll call your attention to the bottom here where total operating expenses are coming in positive by about $18.5 million on a year-to-date basis. So again, really good effort across the agency to stretch the CARES dollars as far as we can by controlling our expenses. And then this helps offset a portion of the $270 million shortfall that we saw in year-to-date system-generated revenues. So on a net basis, we're down about $250 million to date on system-generated revenues and expenses. Next page, please. Again, CARES funding is a critical lifeline not only for the system-generated revenues, but also our public funding revenues, as outlined here. Sales tax, we saw, kind of the ending of the more onerous restrictions after the first wave of COVID. So we saw a little bit pickup in sales tax vis-a-vis where we were in August results. So we see it's still an unfavorable number, but down only about $2 million. PTF, which runs for October in this case, is $2.6 million, and RET for September is down about $1 million. So overall, we're down about $5.2 million for the month. Again, a little bit of wind in our sails vis-a-vis what we've seen in prior months, but again, still slight negative variance to budget. With regard to the next page, on a year-to-date basis, again, we see about $90 million of negative variance overall on public funding. But again, CARES funding is a critical component for us to be able to close the gaps that we've seen in 2020. And we'll talk more about that with regard to the 21 budget. But again, we'll see on the next page with regard to the draws that we've done for CARES funding. The CARES draw is for the month, total about $45 million. On a year-to-date basis, that's about $325 million total of the $817 total received. So that's about 40%. So again, being able to control our expenses has helped us, again, be able to stretch those critical CARES dollars as far as we can. Again, it's very critical for us to receive another tranche of funding in 2021 to be able to close, the gap there. But again, this CARES funding that we received earlier in the pandemic has been critical for us to be able to bridge 2020 and into 2021. Next page, please. With regard to the three commodities that we purchased, fuel, power, and natural gas, we've are at the limit with regard to where we need to be for each of the years that we are currently able to go out to. Again, we're looking for additional authorization at this meeting with regard to natural gas so we can start doing pre-purchases out further than mid-year 2022. And we'll be doing the same in the future here for fuel. But again, we've been able to lock in at very favorable rates, which has provided us, quite a bit of budget favorability, both in prior years, 2020 and in 2021. So again, this has been a bright spot for us with regard to locking in at historically low prices.
Are we expecting prices to continue at that level?
So, I think that there is probably a window to continue to buy at historically low prices. And unfortunately, that's probably directly related to the second wave that we're starting to see with regard to COVID. That obviously has a depressing effect on overall economic activity and thereby has a reciprocal effect on, the fuel prices that we've seen and we'll be doing, 9 months or so. So again, and actually went back further than that, but, we've seen, very, very favorable rates on all three commodities, but fuel in particular, just due to the larger global pandemic.
With the new president-elect, we have heard a lot of bad press, towards oil and petrol, gas, and all that.
So we continue to track, oil prices along with our advisors on a regular basis. Again, I think that, there's obviously, initiatives to transition away from fossil fuel-based economy. But, again, I think that, there's still very, very low prices currently with regard to oil. And again, I think that based on, what you're seeing in the larger global economy, that those prices should still be in the relatively low range in the near future.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
And Jeremy, you've concluded your report?
Yes, that concludes my remarks for the September FAB.
Okay, then we'll ask if anybody else has any questions for you on this matter. Director Irvine?
No questions. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales, any questions for Jeremy?
I don't have any questions, though. Jeremy, I just want to reiterate what I said at the public budget hearings that we had. I just really want to thank, and I know that the rest of the board feels the same way. We just really want to thank the team for all of the hard work and putting the budget together, and for really looking forward and trying to be as creative as possible. And number one, keeping the expenses down as much as possible, and then looking for ways for new income and new revenue to come in. I know it takes a team effort from your team, but also the execution on behalf of the rest of the CTA. You know, we're really grateful for it, and just thank you for the hard work, and keep it up, because we need it. We really need it. So it's just
Thank you. I'll pass the kind words along. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Since there are no further questions, Chairman Silva, we may proceed to agenda item number 4.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus?
Chairman, we don't need to do that with the finance report. It's been accepted by the board, so we can just move to number 4 now.
Okay, let's move to number 5.
Number 4. The finance report was number 3 on the agenda.
Next order of business is the review of amending ordinance 019-103, approving the fiscal years 2020-2024 capital improvement program. Jeremy.
Thank you. Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'm here today to present an amendment to the 2020 through 2024 Capital Improvement Program, or CIP. In November 2019, the board approved the $5.1 billion CIP, and the CIP was amended in April and in August, and we are now proposing a final closing amendment to incorporate additional known changes. The amendment is being done to, 1, reduce the amount of CTA bond funds needed by $17.5 million, as funding from the state bond program is sufficient to provide the related facility improvement costs, and 2, to increase the amount of Department of Homeland Security grants by $8.9 million to fund cybersecurity upgrades to CTA's fiber optic network, as well as pass-through funding for the Chicago Police Department's Transit Operations Division. And 3rd, to include a project award of $2.5 million from the IEPA for the purchase of 3 electric buses, and the net decrease to the 2020 through 2024 CIP is $6.1 million. This concludes my remarks, and glad to answer any questions.
How many buses, electric buses, are we buying?
So with regard to total electric buses, and we'll also be talking about this with regard to the 2021 through 25 CIP, we're looking at 70 buses with 9 chargers.
70 buses. That's a good amount. Very good.
We're very excited.
Jeremy, are they, I don't know if this is a question for you or for our president, are they going to the buses that they're adding or replacing? What are they going to do with those buses? Are they going to
Usually the buses that we replace are buses we retire. They're beyond their useful life. And so we would scrap them and retire them.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Chairman Silva, do you have any more questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, Director Irvine?
No questions, thanks.
Director Cheveray?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Chairman, there are no further questions on agenda item number 4.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to agenda items number 5 and number 6. We will consider them as a single package.
Our next order of business is the review of 2 ordinances. The first ordinance is an ordinance adopting a budget for calendar year 2021 and financial plan for calendar years 2022-23. And the second ordinance is an ordinance approving the fiscal years 2021 to 2025 and cooperative agreements and amendments and related materials. Jeremy?
Thank you. Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and before you today is the 2021 budget. So we'll walk through a brief presentation here. Next page, please. With regard to the 21 budget, we're presenting a budget of $1.45 billion. And again, this is a budget that's dependent upon additional federal stimulus funding due to the revenue shortfalls that are resulting from the pandemic. Again, as we outlined in the FAB presentation, we've seen a dramatic impact due to the pandemic on both our system-generated revenues as well as our public funding. The CTA continues to deliver critical service and at normal service levels to our customers because, again, it's been proven out through the pandemic that indeed public transit is an essential service. So this has been a critical lifeline to both our customers as well as, our employees. But getting those customers to and from our from the essential service work and to those essential services has been an economic benefit to the city and will continue to be an economic benefit in the recovery post the pandemic. We continue to tighten our belts with regard to our budgeted line items. In fact, over the last 5 years, we've attained almost $170 million of budgetary efficiencies. This number is almost $330 million over the last 10 years. So our budget would be either 10% or 20%, depending on what time frame you're looking at, higher than it is today if it were not for these previously enacted efficiencies. We've also done a great job of living within our means with regard to budgeted expense levels. And again, this is due in part to the fact that we already had a best-in-class cleaning regimen prior to the pandemic, so we did not see the explosive costs that you've seen in other jurisdictions around the country with regard to ramping up for those cleaning efforts. So again, we'll be looking at extending these three primary tracks through the 21 budget. Next page, please. With regard to the revenues, we have a diverse stream of revenues, as you can see here in the pie chart to the lower left, but they are all economically sensitive, revenue streams. We did receive, and because of this, we did receive $817 million of CARES funding from the federal government, which again was a nod to the fact of how important public transit was and continues to be, as well as the sensitivity that we experience with regard to our revenue streams. We received $817 million. A portion of that, as I indicated in the prior FAB presentation, will be carried over into 2021 budget to the tune of about $260 million. So we were able to reduce the gap for 2021 down from over $600 million to slightly under $400 million of $372 million. But again, additional budget actions will be needed to close that gap. And again, we hope that that comes in the form of additional federal stimulus funding. We also, may see additional cuts from the state. As you know, we already get cut about $38 million a year, from prior cuts that were enacted going back to 2015. There could be additional cuts included due to the state's own fiscal situation, and also further exacerbated by the fact that fair tax did not pass. With regard to expenses, we've talked about how we've been able to control our expenses, but with regard to bending expense curve dramatically, that again is tied directly to service levels. As you can see here, a predominant share of our expenses are on the labor side or directly related to service levels, whether it be fuel and power, materials, or other expenses. So again, we have a fairly inflexible expense categories unless you're talking about service levels. It is also important to point out that our admin labor line, highlighted here at 5%, is already very lean vis-a-vis what you see in the industry at large and other governmental entities where you typically see over 10%. So again, we've done a good job of tightening our belts, and we'll continue to look for efforts going forward. Next page, please. With regard to efficiencies, I highlighted already that we've attained almost 170 or $330 million of efficiencies over the last 5 or 10 years. We continue to look for efficiencies in the 2021 budget. We've already included restricting hiring on vacant positions, locking in power costs, aligning our capital uses with capital sources, as well as quite a bit of savings that we were able to attain on the refunding for savings that we completed about a month and a half ago on some outstanding bonds. We'll also continue to work with the unions on additional concessions in 2021. But again, it's just an indication that we continue to look at every opportunity to again, reduce and constrain our expenses. But again, we're facing historic times with regard to the pandemic. And with regard to that, our two historic levers that we have is one is fares. When we previously enact a fare increase, that generates about $20 to $25 million a year. Based on current ridership levels, that would only generate about $5 million a year. And then if we were to adjust service levels, it would mean dramatic reductions to close a gap of $372 million. So again, this is something that not only the CTA wrestles with, but industry-wide we're wrestling with this. And again, I think that you saw a commitment from the federal government previously for historic levels of funding that were supported on both sides of the aisle. So again, we remain cautiously optimistic that we'll see another package come through Washington for additional stimulus that will carry us through 2021. That concludes my remarks with regard to the operating budget, and I'll pause there for a moment. Is there any questions with regard to the operating budget?
Yes, can you, we are relying a lot, in the federal stimulus. Are we doing something specific? We're doing something out of the normal, lobbying that we do, in order to try to get that federal stimulus. I know it's not easy.
Yeah, so, we continue to make our voices heard in Washington as an industry, and as an entity, again, because I think that DC and Congress has seen the multiplier effect of transit. APTA, which is the industry organization, for transit, has indicated that every dollar invested in transit has a $4 economic value to the communities that they serve. So again, I think that that point was heard loud and clear on Capitol Hill. I think that will continue to be heard. And I think that, again, we really were a shining star during, throughout the pandemic, but particularly at the front end of the pandemic, where we really were providing an essential service to the people of Chicago, getting them back and forth to those essential services and getting those essential workers to their final destinations. So again, I think that point resonates loud and clear. And again, I think that's why we remain cautiously optimistic that there'll be an additional tranche of funding coming out of DC.
Director Silva, to put a finer point on that, I have been personally involved in discussions in Congress around the emergency relief funding that we can get. The House has already passed a bill called the HEROES Act that will provide up to $32 billion worth of funding for public transit. The Senate has yet to take up a similar proposal, but we continue to work closely with the industry. We also continue to work closely with the city. The mayor and her government affairs team are very familiar with our need and ask, and the mayor certainly made it a priority for her requests as well in conversations she's having up on the Hill as we deal with this issue. And I am cautiously optimistic that we will ultimately see some level of relief. I think the real question that we're facing is the timing of that. And that's one of the reasons why we're certainly, focused on doing everything that we can to extend our CARES Act funding and reduce our expenses while continuing to provide a full level of service to our customers for as long as possible in order to make sure that we are in a position to receive those funds before we would have to make the tough and difficult decisions around what we would do to service.
But I mean, all the agencies have the same problem, right?
Yeah, but the difference is that we have been successful once before. So it is not like we're starting from scratch with this discussion. We, with the CARES Act, no one thought at the time that we would get funding in the CARES Act for public transit. And we actually ended up getting quite a bit of funding, well over $20 billion. The House has already allocated over $30 billion. So we know that our message is being heard, and we've seen Congress take action on it. What the issue is that they haven't come to resolution in general about emergency relief funding for anybody. But the good news is that we're in the conversation and we're part of the negotiations. So that's one reason that I'm optimistic that at the end of the day, we will end up getting something. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't believe there will not be another emergency relief fund for the country. And so the real issue at this point in time is making sure that you're a part of the discussions around what that fund will look like. And we are a part of those discussions right now. So I feel like we're in a good place, and we just have to wait and see how it all plays out with this new administration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chairman Silver, why don't we allow Jeremy to finish his presentation on the capital component, and then I'll go around and the board members, if they wish to ask questions about the operating budget, they can do it at the same time. Jeremy?
Thank you. The 2021 through 2025 capital improvement program, known as the CIP, is a $3.4 billion program. The largest source of funding is federal funds, followed by state bond funds and the recurring pay-as-you-go revenues passed by the state last year. CTA will also continue to invest in its capital program through the issuance of bonds. The fiscal year 2025 federal formula and state PAYGO funds have not yet been allocated to the service boards. We are working with RTA on an Invest in Transit framework, which will provide guidance on how the funding will be allocated in 2025 and beyond. So the total 5-year CIP is lower than it would be if the fifth year had been allocated. The CIP continues to fund transformative projects such as major rail line projects, including the Red Purple Line modernization, the Red Line extension to the south, and Your New Blue. We're also investing in bus and rail fleet modernization, the All Stations Accessibility Program, and the State of Good Repair projects. As we've talked about in the past, investing in the capital program drives economic development in the city and is important for economic recovery. Again, as I indicated with regard to APTA, that's a 1-to-4 ratio. For every dollar invested, it generates $4 of economic benefit. So again, it's really important for us to continue investing in our capital program and capital assets. Next slide. We outlined the 3 major rail line projects that we're undertaking. Much of the work for Your New Blue is completed. Going into 2021, we'll continue to work on the O'Hare to Jefferson Park signal upgrade and the Harlem Station bus bridge reconstruction. The 5-year CIP provides for the final allotment of funding to complete the project development phase of the Red Line extension. RPM is also continuing to design and stage construction work for the new structure, tracks, and stations in the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr area. Next slide. This slide shows the bus and rail fleet modernization efforts. On the bus side, we continue to purchase new standard buses, as well as new electric buses, and overhaul a portion of the existing fleet. On the rail side, we funded the purchase of new 7000 series rail cars, overhaul work for existing 5000 series rail cars, and the purchase of 4 new diesel locomotives. We also continue to invest in capital maintenance to target needs between overhaul cycles for both bus and rail cars. Next slide, please. And finally, phase 1 of the All Stations Accessibility Plan, known as ASAP, is funded through the 5-year CIP. ASAP is a comprehensive 20-year plan to make all stations vertically accessible. Phase 1 of the plan includes 9 stations to be made fully accessible, including 4 stations as part of the Red Purple Modernization Program, the Austin Green Line Station, California, Montrose, and Racine Blue Lines, State and Lake Elevated Station, and upgrades or replacements to up to 20 existing elevators. This concludes my remarks, and glad to answer any questions.
Chairman Silva, any questions?
Not yet. Go ahead.
All right. Director Irvine, any questions on Jeremy's presentations?
No, I don't have any questions. Thanks, Jeremy.
Director Chevrolet. Director Chevrolet, any questions for Jeremy? We can come
Sorry,
back.
I was muted. No questions.
Oh, okay, thank you, Judge. Director Jakes.
No questions.
Director Miller.
No question, just a comment. Want to say what a job to Jeremy and the entire team. President Carter closing gaps and 18 million in the positive, just and in comparison to many of the cities being on a national convention board, talking to many of our friends around the country. You all doing a great job. Just want to commend that. Thanks.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Director Alvarez, do you have any questions for Jeremy?
No, I guess the only question, if it's that, or more of a comment, with regards to the second wave of COVID, could you talk a little bit about within the budget some of the things that we've already prepared, ourselves with for the second wave, and then secondly, I know we're looking closely at ridership because that may shift, and how, if anything, that would affect the budget that we're proposing.
So with regard to ridership, I'll just ask for Mike Connolly to be prepared to comment on that. And then with regard to COVID, again, we've continued to make a commitment to the best-in-class cleaning that we've already had prior COVID, but we continue to ramp up efforts with regard to cleaning on the buses, on the rail cars, and the stations. So again, this budget also includes those efforts and expanded efforts with regard to the cleaning regimen that we've already enacted.
Jeremy, I think what the director was trying to get to is in our forecast for next year's budget, what are we accounting for in terms of revenue relative to ridership and what we anticipated to be the ongoing impact of the pandemic? And I know that in developing our forecast, we took a very conservative approach to what the ridership gains would be for next year because we recognize that we still had to get through the pandemic over the course of this year and into next year. But could you explain a little bit more about sort of how we got to that analysis?
So we conducted a pretty detailed analysis along with MIT on our on our system generated revenues, as well as the RTA, who sets the marks with regard to public funding. We've been very conservative or fairly conservative with regard to revenues projected for 2020 and for 2021. What we have seen nationally, as well as what we've done internally, is expect that there would be a second wave of COVID. So we did factor that into our budgetary expectations, for through the remaining portion of 2020, which is called the 2020 forecast, as well as the 2021 budget. In fact, we're down about 55% versus 2019 levels for both 2020 forecast as well as the 2021 budget. We expect a little bit of a bump back at the latter half of 2021. So we are slightly above, the almost 60%, loss that we're seeing here in 2020. So we're only in the mid 50s for expectation of loss vis-a-vis, our 2019 levels for system generated revenues, while the marks from the RTA are down about 20% for public funding. So again, this kind of highlights the fact that we are in a dramatically different situation than even a lot of governmental entities that rely on, the typical suite of economically sensitive, taxes such as sales tax. We're down a lot. Like I said, we're down about 20%, and we expect that to continue into 2021. But it's really that system generated revenue strip where we're seeing that down multiples of that, 55% or so for not only for 2020 but going into 2021 as well. So again, we've been conservative in our estimates for the 2021 budget, but again, those are fairly consistent with what you're seeing nationwide per the survey that we did with MIT.
Jeremy, is Mike kindly going to address the ridership question that came up earlier? Is Mike available?
I'd be glad to comment about it. As Jeremy said, we've been very conservative in projecting what will happen with ridership, and our ridership expectations for next year are a rebound of about 8% from where we are currently. Just to put that in perspective, you need to know that at our low point, we were down about 80%. In terms of ridership. And we're now down to the point, or have recovered to the point, where we're only down about 70%. So we've recovered 10 percentage points from the lowest point that we saw during the COVID outbreak. And we're expecting to, as I say, reach another 8% increase over the next 12 months. We believe it will be slow, and it won't be without some glitches and some bumps, but we think it will continue to be positive.
I guess my question was with regards to a potential big bump, which would be the second wave of COVID. And had we taken, some of those numbers into account with the budget, and I would assume we're taking a close look, especially now with the mayor's advisory, right, for us to stay home in the next couple of weeks. So I'm kind of trying to figure out or explanation of how that would factor in and how we're keeping a close eye on that. And then when we expect to see if there is any change in the numbers, or if we have to make any change.
We are monitoring our ridership levels, particularly this week, to see how the advisory and even more importantly now, the governor's transition back to tier 3 impacts our ridership levels. We don't have enough data yet to really start to understand the impact of that. It'll probably take us a couple of weeks to just see what happens with ridership trends. Clearly, our estimates about our CARES Act funding and how long we think it will last are dependent on certain assumptions, albeit conservative, about what's going on with our ridership and therefore our revenue. And if we were to say go into another stay-at-home order, that would impact, I think, to some significant degree, the CARES Act money that we have available going into next year. While we certainly, as Jeremy and Mike had pointed out, forecasted a very conservative expectation in the short term about what's happening with our ridership, we certainly are not forecasting a dramatic drop in our ridership again. And if that were to happen and we were to go back to, say, the ridership levels that we experienced in March and April of last year, then that would have an impact on our expectations on when we would need federal funding in order to basically address the budget deficit for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from any other board members for Jeremy on these budget issues? No?
No questions.
Okay, well then hearing none, Chairman, there are no further questions on this matter.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these 2 items on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Chairman Silver. We may proceed now to agenda item number 7.
Our next order of business is the review and ordinance authorizing the treasurer to execute a natural gas contract. Jeremy.
Thank you. Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer. Today I present for your consideration an ordinance for natural gas. The ordinance authorizes the CFO, with the approval of the board chairman or vice chair, to execute a new natural gas contract with an anticipated start date of May 1st, 2022. The CTA is seeking qualified firms to supply natural gas and manage storage daily for the larger CTA facilities. The new contract term is a base year of 3 years, starting in May of 2022, with 2 one-year extensions or one option to extend for an additional period of 2 years. Bidders' fixed prices are valid for only a few hours. That's typically about 4 hours due to market volatility. So advanced board approval is necessary to authorize the CFO with the board chairman or vice chair approval to execute the contract. As in the current natural gas contract, CTA will have flexibility to purchase supply using a fixed price or an index price or a combination of both once the contract is in place. CTA can take advantage of historically low prices for future supply, even out 2.5 years from the current contract execution. This contract enables CTA to reduce the budget impact of volatile pricing in the market. And this concludes my remarks, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Chairman Silva, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions, Greg.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Alvaro Rosales?
No questions. I was just interested when I found out that once you get the numbers, that you only have such a short period of time, less than 4 hours, you were telling me, Jeremy, to make those decisions. So
Yeah,
no
it's very, very
questions.
quick turnaround.
Very quick turnaround. Will get us a good deal.
Yes,
Thank you.
we will.
Okay, thanks. Chairman Silva, there are no further questions on this item.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved, Director Silva.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Chairman. We may proceed to item number 8.
Next order of business is an ordinance authorizing a master license agreement with New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, doing business as AT&T Mobility, to install, operate, and maintain wireless communication equipment on designated authority property. Jeremy.
Thank you. Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer. Today, I present for your consideration an ordinance approving a master license agreement with AT&T, granting AT&T the non-exclusive right to install, operate, and maintain wireless communication equipment on CTA property. The master license agreement sets forth the terms that would govern any placement of wireless communications equipment by AT&T on CTA property, a comprehensive list of CTA property that may be suitable for installation of wireless equipment was included in the RFQ and is incorporated into the master license agreement. Any future installation under this agreement must be approved by CTA staff and may be documented in a site addendum to the master license agreement. The initial term of the proposed master license agreement is for 10 years with 2 5-year options to extend, and each site addendum will have a term of 10 years with 2 5-year options to extend. CTA is permitted to terminate the agreement at any time upon 30 days notice and the repayment of AT&T's unamortized installation costs. If approved, the new license agreement with AT&T would commence upon signing, and AT&T will pay CTA an annual site fee for the right to locate its wireless communications equipment on CTA property. The fee is per site and varies based on the size of the installation as well as the location. And AT&T will also be responsible for a one-time administrative fee for each site addendum executed and will be responsible for all equipment and installation costs. We value that the overall value of the initial set of 5 locations for the base term would be about $318,000, and for the base plus options, $732,000. Again, for the 5 locations in this initial cohort. This concludes my remarks and glad to answer any questions.
It's a very competitive industry, this one, okay, that we should have better numbers.
So this is, we've checked with regard to the potential revenue that would come from this new revenue stream. And this is, these are competitive numbers that we would get on the placement of the equipment on our facilities. So again, we have the potential to scale this quite a bit. And again, this is for 5 locations. So, if we were to, do even the mini macro cell towers, which are the smallest of the cellular towers that they install, if we were to scale this to 100 locations, that would be, up to $500,000 per year. So again, with the rollout of 5G, not only for AT&T, but for the other carriers that, could still come into this program, we have the ability to compete along with other locations throughout the city for these, for the installation of these telecom equipment. So again, we hope that we'll be able to continue to scale this up. And as the Vice Chair mentioned earlier, with regard to alternative revenues, we continue to try to be creative and look for every opportunity to derive additional revenues for CTA. So we're very excited about this initial kind of foray into this master license structure, which should help us kind of expedite the authorization of these types of agreements in the future, so that again we can be very competitive and compete out there with other locations to secure the equipment on our facilities and thereby generate those dollars. Those dollars, again, the matrix of what we're talking about was affirmed and confirmed by JLL. So again, we're very much comfortable with the levels that we're getting, our market type levels, and with the ability to really scale this and generate some real revenue over the course of the term of the agreements.
So we're gonna do a new RFP, okay, for the 5G?
No, so this will handle all of that. So this will handle any implementation of telecom communication equipment on CTA, property and equipment. So this really is taking advantage of and kind of setting a very clear, expectation and framework and platform for our discussions with AT&T as they roll out their 5G network. 5G, they're going to have to implement a number of new, equipment upgrades throughout their system. And this mini macro cell tower that I'm referring to, under the 5G technology, has a very limited range. So you're talking about hundreds of feet. So they're going to have hundreds and thousands of relays to allow for the technology to work properly as part of their 5G rollout. So again, this really sets the stage for CTA to be able to take advantage of AT&T and the other carriers rolling out their 5G network, and the fact that they will need a number of new locations to put their mini macro cell towers, to enhance that network that's necessary for the 5G technology. So again, this really helps us kind of compete in a much quicker and more efficient way than we've ever been able to do before.
Director Silva, I think it may be helpful to explain sort of CTA's relationship in this conversation. There are 2 sides to what we're doing right now. One is the piece that Jeremy's talking about, where we're actually trying to lease space to the wireless carriers so that they can build out their network. You're going to be hearing about another contract later on in the committee meeting where we're the consumer of the wireless services. And in that contract, we will be pursuing, although this is not what's before you today, we are going out an RFP for that, which we basically get our cell phones and our routers and other things, where we will be pursuing the 5G opportunities as part of that RFP. So there are 2 items that are on the board agenda today. One is this one that Jeremy's talking about, where we're basically, for lack of a better word, we're the landlords leasing space to the wireless companies so that they can put their equipment on our property. And then there's a second contract that we're going to be talking about later, where we're the consumer buying cell phones and other equipment from the wireless companies that ultimately we'll be going out for a new RFP for that will address 5G as we go forward.
Well, we're going into a new business there, eh?
Yes, this is a new business for us that Jeremy is pursuing, but it's one that the cellular companies are very interested in pursuing because, as he indicated, they want to build out their 5G network, and they need lots of property to make that happen. And ideally, CTA, because our structure runs through the entire city, becomes a very ideal location for them to place their equipment. So I would agree with Jeremy's assessment that as the cellular companies start to build out their network and start to look for additional locations to place their transmitters, we will probably see an increase in interest in CTA to be a vehicle where they can place that equipment.
Yeah, that's great. Good.
Any questions, Director Irvine, on this matter?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Director Chevrolet,
No questions.
Director Jakes,
No questions.
Director Miller,
No questions.
Director Alvaro Rosales.
No questions, just a good opportunity. I'd love for us to hear, though, I don't know, maybe 6 months out or every once in a while, a report of, because this is a master agreement, license agreement of how this is growing. I know there's a lot of potential for growth, but I'd love to hear a report every couple of months or something, every 6
Sure,
months.
we can plan to give a board a regular update report on what's happening with
That'd
the
be great.
master license agreement. We'll incorporate that into the board process.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dorval. Chairman Silva, there are no further questions.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Chairman Silva, it's been moved and seconded. You may proceed to agenda item number 9.
Our next order of business is an ordinance authorizing a license agreement with Smash Interactive PK LLC for property located at 2500-2600 South State Street, Chicago, Illinois, Green Line. Bill Mooney.
Good afternoon, Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Real estate staff recommends the approval of an ordinance authorizing the license of 15,938 square feet of vacant unimproved property below the CTA's Green Line, located at 2500 to 2600 South Wabash, to Smash Interactive PK LLC. Smash Interactive will use the property for parking. The license has an initial monthly rent of $4,000 per month for the first year, and the agreement includes annual rent escalations of 3%. Any improvements made upon the property will require the prior approval of the CTA and will be the sole cost of the licensee. The term of the license is for an initial 10-year period with 2 5-year options. The agreement can be terminated by the CTA for transportation purposes with 30 days notice or by either party with 2 years notice. I will be happy to take any questions at this time.
What are they gonna use this property?
For parking, Director.
Parking.
Director Irvine, any questions?
No questions.
Director Chevrolet,
No questions.
Director Jakes,
No questions.
Director Miller.
No questions.
Thank you. Director Alvaro Rosales, any questions?
No questions.
Chairman, there are no further questions on this matter.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Jakes, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman, we may now proceed to item number 10.
Our next order of business is an ordinance authorizing a third amendment to an antenna site license agreement with GRE-COCO Orrington Owner LLC for the operation of authorities communications equipment located at 1603 Orrington Avenue, Evanston, Illinois. Bill Mooney.
Thank you again. Staff recommends the approval of an ordinance authorizing a third amendment to a license for a rooftop antenna located at 1603 Orrington Avenue in Evanston. GRE Orrington Owner LLC owns a building located at 1603 Orrington Avenue. the CTA has a license to operate communications facilities, including an antenna for its radio communications system at this location since 1982. The amendment extends the term through February 1st, 2024, with an annual license fee of $12,112.80 for the first year, which will cover the rent and electrical usage. The agreement includes annual rent escalations thereafter of 3%. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Tell me the difference of this antenna to the ones used by the cell phones.
So this is a much larger antenna and support equipment for our radio. So we use a series of two-way radios for personnel to communicate on a closed band CTA network. So this is for train operators and right-of-way workers and other people and bus personnel to be able to communicate with our control center. And this is a relay antenna that allows us to kind of relay and rebroadcast that signal.
Is the technology okay, more advanced than the cell phones, or is it, how can you compare the two systems?
I mean, they're different technologies, Director. One is cellular, which works kind of on a different range, where this is a closed band radio network that has a dedicated frequency for CTA channels in this area.
But cost-wise, what?
The cost of so once the infrastructure is in place, other than maintaining this rent agreement, our cost for that infrastructure is pretty low at this point. Where we would, if we pay, you pay for cell phones, you pay a monthly fee for the usage of those cell phones and such.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, Director Irvine?
No. Thank you.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Alvarado Rosales?
No questions.
Are there no further questions, Chairman Silva?
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We may proceed to agenda item number 11, Chairman.
Next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing an agreement with Norfolk Southern Railway Company for the preliminary engineering services for the Red Line Extension RLE project. Mike Connolly.
Good afternoon, directors. I'm Mike Connolly, your Chief Planning Officer. Before you today is an agreement with the Norfolk Southern Railway Company for preliminary engineering services for the Red Line Extension Project, or RLE. The RLE project requires the use of Norfolk Southern property between approximately 118th Street and 124th Street. This agreement and the work by Norfolk Southern is necessary to finalize the RLE project alignment and plans for the yard and shop facility, to provide a basis for future agreements with Norfolk Southern, and to mitigate third-party risks early in this large construction project. As a part of these PE services, or preliminary engineering services, Norfolk Southern will review CTA engineering plans, will conduct site visits, and participate in correspondence and meetings to progress the project. Norfolk Southern will also draft, review, and handle future project agreements and coordinate schedules for construction work. We have an existing preliminary engineering services agreement with Norfolk Southern, which expires at the end of this year. The agreement before you today will follow the existing agreement. The base cost of the agreement is $55,000, but we are requesting an additional $20,000 contingency separate from the agreement in case the cost of the work exceeds the $55,000 estimate. Funding to cover these costs is available within the authorized RLE project budget. I'm glad to try to answer any questions that you may have about this agreement.
Chairman Silva?
I don't have questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Alvarado Rosales?
No questions.
Chairman Silva, there are no further questions on this.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. Chairman, we may proceed to agenda item number 12, the last ordinance.
Our next order of business is an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Cook County Assessor's Office to access geographic information system data. Mike Connolly.
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Mike Connolly, your Chief Planning Officer. The item before you today would authorize entry into an IGA with the Cook County Assessor's Office, which would allow CTA to continue to access Geographic Information System, or GIS, data. CTA has entered into an intergovernmental agreement with the Cook County Assessor's Office in previous years in order to have access to and license to use this data at no cost. This agreement will allow us to receive updated assessors data, which provides detailed information at each property level. We get a table of about 1,800,000 records that usually date from the previous year from the assessors. This data is used by strategic planning for general planning and NEPA studies, by business development, and by our real estate department. The data is specifically needed during the upcoming months for the Transit Supportive Development Study and the NEPA documentation on the Red Line Extension, or RLE project. We are requesting renewal of this agreement for an additional year at no cost to CTA. Thank you. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have about this agreement.
You didn't mention taxes. Is it used for taxes also?
The assessor's database is used by them, but not by us for taxes, no.
Thank you.
Director Irvine?
No questions, thanks.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Are there no other questions, Chairman Silva?
If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Let's move on to the contracts. The first one, Chairman Silva, is B as in boy 1.
Our next order of business is contract B-1A, contract rental and laundering of work clothing.
Any questions, Director Silva?
No, not for me.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Chairman, we may proceed to contract B as in boy 2.
Our next order of business is contract B2, a contract for traction power cables.
Chairman Silva?
Can you give us some explanation, okay, of the power cables that you're talking about here?
Ellen or Bill Mooney?
Bill Mooney should be able to answer that for you.
That's what I was
Yes, Director, I'm glad to answer that question. Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure, again, for the record. So these are large capacity copper cables we use that connects our substations where we produce our electricity to the third rail on our system to power the trains.
You leasing these ones or you are?
This is a blanket contract to allow us to procure the cable for construction and maintenance purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Director Irvine?
No questions, thanks.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions, Greg.
Okay, thank you. Director Miller?
No question.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Okay, we're finished with questions for the power cables. Chairman, we may proceed to contract C as in cat 1.
Next order of business is a contract number C as in cat 1, an RFP for advertising services.
Questions, Alex?
Yeah, can you give us a little, some explanation, okay, of the advertising services that we're going to be using or selling for this?
That's Jeremy or Ellen?
This is Jeremy Fine. I'm glad to answer that. Chief Financial Officer. This is a portfolio of 23 signed structures with 33 static sign faces. It includes the right to develop new freestanding billboards, either static or digital, and upgrade the existing displays to digital as well upon approval by CTA and receipt of all necessary permits. The term of the agreement would be for 20 years with one 10-year option, and the contract would start in January 1st of 2021. This would be with Outfront Media, and they would be taking over for Clear Channel. We have several suites of advertising, platform. One is obviously the intersection contract that we have for, the platform panels and the urban panels. Another is for a small cohort of billboards out at Forest Park. And then the third is this portfolio that we're talking about here, the 23 sign locations around the city, with the potential to expand that further. So, again, we have a great opportunity to enter into a contract with Outfront Media, who is a big almost $2 billion company that operates in this space nationally and internationally, as well as with other transit agencies. We were very excited at the type of bid that we received here with regard to the minimum annual guarantee that we'll be receiving, as well as a commitment for additional capital funds to upgrade the current signs that we have in the system. So again, we see, over the 20-year base term that this contract, based on the current portfolio of signs, could be worth, almost $30 million, or over the 30-year term, almost $50 million. So again, we're very excited about this opportunity to continue to build out all of our alternative revenues, and glad to answer any questions. And Ellen is on as well to answer any questions particular to the contract.
Thank you. Chairman Silver?
Happy with the prices, I guess, that you got for these services, but we have had them before, right?
We have had them before. What this actually does as well is expand the potential opportunity to expand that, those 23 locations into more. But yes, we have had the current 23 locations, but the minimum annual guarantee is significantly more than what we've received previously on this portfolio. So again, we're going from almost 500 K to over $1 million per year for the 23 locations.
Are we using some advertising, virtual advertising?
Virtual advertising on this portfolio?
Yes.
So we have the ability and a commitment from Outfront to look at doing electronic advertising, converting to digital billboards. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we have the ability under this contract, and again, a commitment from Outfront, because that's actually the way that the industry is novating to is to digital billboards. So again, we'll be working hand in glove with them, as well as the city or the state or whoever would be the permitting entity based on the location of those signs, as well as additional signs to see if we can continue to grow this revenue stream. But again, we're very excited about the relationship here with Outfront and the commitment that they made to transition some of these static signs to digital.
Thank you, Jeremy. Director Irvine, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions. I mean, this is great. The 34 million in capital investment over the 20 years, are we anticipating a lot of that is digital expansion or upgrade for what we have? Or?
That would be for the digital upgrades of the signs that we're talking about. Obviously, those digital signs, they're kind of custom tailored, so they're very expensive. And again, I think that we also have the ability to tap into some of that if there's new construction, with regard to new signs, at other locations throughout our system and throughout our properties. So again, we'll be working with Outfront, who is a known entity here in Chicagoland, which is great because they understand kind of the permitting process locally for, not only the novation from static to digital, but also new locations. So they'll be
No, that's great. Thank you. Thanks, Ellen, too. I know you worked.
You're welcome.
Good job.
All right, thank you both. Chairman, we may proceed now to contract G as in girl 1.
Next order of business is a contract number G1, a change order regarding the authority's website's contract.
Chairman Silva?
Yeah, no, I don't have a question.
No questions on this matter? Okay. Director Irvine?
No questions.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
All right, Chairman Silva may now proceed to contract G as in girl 2.
The next order of business is contract number G2, a change order for cellular voice and data services.
Any questions, Chairman Silva?
Yes, now we have 3 contracts, going, into cellular ones. We have the one, can you explain a little bit, how they interact with each other?
Director Silva, I can ask one to interact, but this is the other contract that I was mentioning earlier, where we're the consumer of the products. So this is the contract that covers our cell phones, our routers, our other cellular equipment. And I can have someone explain to you what we're doing with this change order, but this is the one that ultimately will be going out for a new RFP on in the upcoming year that will basically address the 5G service going forward.
No, that's fine. Let's proceed, I mean, I don't have a question.
That's fine, and staff can always get back to you with more information on this, Director. We will. Any questions from Director Irvine?
No questions.
Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
I guess the only question is if our staff will look at any opportunities for DBE participation with regards to this particular contract.
Well, good afternoon, Director Alvarez-Rosales, Juan Pablo Prieto, Director of Diversity Programs. On the delivery of the service, no, because we contract directly with the providers that provide us the service. So there's no subcontracting opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Juan Pablo. Chairman Silva, we may, let's see, that was G2, correct? Yes. We proceed to number H1.
Next order of business is a contract number H1, an RFP for security guard services.
Do you have any questions, Chairman Silva?
No, I don't have any questions.
Director Irvine?
Can you just explain this real quick about, it's a pretty significant change order. So I understand that this contract is going to be split in the future, or the services will be split?
That's correct. We anticipate going out for 2 RFPs in the future. We will do one for the buses and trains and one for the facilities.
Director, one of the reasons that we're doing this is that we want to maximize the opportunities for DBE participation in the contract. And, we realize that breaking up this contract may create more opportunities than bidding it all out as one. So in order for us to get through that process, we need to do a change order to the existing contract to keep everything in place. But the expectation is when we come back to the board sometime next year, we'll provide a much higher level of DBE participation than we might have gotten otherwise.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, President Carter. Appreciate the explanation.
Thank you, President. Director Chevrolet, any questions?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
All right, that was H1. Chairman, we may now go to contract J1.
J1. Our final order of business is contract number J1, a change order for legal administrative services.
Chairman Silva, any questions?
No, not really, no.
All right, Director Irvine,
No questions.
Director Chevrolet,
No questions?
Dr. Jakes,
No questions.
Director Miller,
No question.
Director Alvarez.
No questions.
All right, Chairman Silva, there's no more questions, so we may proceed to number 13A.
Since there are no further questions on the contracts, may I have leave to place all 7 contracts on the omnibus?
So moved.
And I second. Thank you.
Moved by Director Jakes, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to number 13B as in boy.
Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to approve the omnibus and recommend the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been moved by Director Jakes, seconded by Director Irvine. I will now take a roll call vote. Director Irvine,
Yes.
Director Chevrolet,
Yes.
Director Jakes,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Rosales,
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
The motion to approve the omnibus passes with 6 yes votes, Chairman Silva. You may proceed to committee agenda item number 14.
And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I second.
Moved by Director Jakes, seconded by Director Irvine. I'll take a roll call vote on the motion to adjourn. Director Irvine,
Yes.
Director Chevrolet,
Yes.
Director Jakes,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Rosales,
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
Motion passes with 6 yes votes. We are adjourned, and there'll be an approximate 5-minute break until Good afternoon. This is Gregory Longini, Board Secretary. We are about to begin the regular scheduled board meeting. Turn over to Chairman Arabelle Alvarez-Rosales.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Chicago Transit Board for November 18th, 2020. Would the secretary call the roll?
Yes, Director Irvine.
Here.
Director Chevrolet.
Here.
Director Jakes.
Present.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Silva. Director Silva? You might still be muted.
Here.
Thank you. Chairman Alvarez-Rosales.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum with all 6 members of the board present.
Great, thank you, Greg.
Good
Our first
afternoon.
order of business
This is
is
Gregory
public
Longini,
comment.
Board
Greg?
Secretary. We are about to begin the regular scheduled board meeting. Turn over to Chairman Arabelle Alvarez-Rosales.
Thank you, Greg.
If you could please keep his comments to about 3 to 4 minutes. Sir, go right ahead and address the board.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Watts. You can speak.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, great. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Hello, illustrious board. I really appreciate the fact that you've opened your ears to what is being said, and I thank you, Mr. Longini, for the good customer service. I want to get directly to the point, and I want the people on the board to really imagine this, especially with seniors. I catch the 71st Street bus, which goes from Torrance Avenue in the hundreds down to 69th Street. So imagine with the COVID rules that we have now, that 12 people or 15 people, whichever is the bus regulation for the amount of people that can get on the bus for COVID, get on between Torrance and we could say hypothetically commercial. That bus can run express if those people desire not to get off. It can run express from commercial all the way to 69th and the red Dan Ryan, which leaves people getting passed up at Yates, the end of commercial, Jeffrey, Cottage Grove, King Drive to the Dan Ryan. Now imagine it's a cold day, 20 degrees, 10 below zero, and people out there waiting and get passed up because nobody is getting off the bus and people are sitting out there waiting for a bus. You cannot, even with the regulations that you all put in place where you may be able to use the technology to see when is a seat available, you cannot properly plan for that. I think that we need to relook at that particular situation, even if it comes down to a hand count when the bus driver has to pull over to the side, say how many people are getting off by Cottage Grove or whatever, so that they can kind of regulate better than they were doing right now. One particular time, and I'll be done. One particular time was a man with a cast who had to go to the hospital for his checkup. He got out there an hour early. I was out there with him. We got passed up by 2 buses. Then we had to walk over to Stony Island, go up to 79th Street, go back over. He missed his appointment. He was late. And also it was a great inconvenience to me. I had an appointment as well because of these particular tactics. When it gets cold, nobody's factoring that in. So I'm hoping that you all will do that. And the other comment that I have is that people have been super lackadaisical about the maintenance of keeping people from smoking on the train. I catch the trains. I've been catching the trains for 53 years. So it's never been this bad. And there's no maintenance on that. It's very, 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 very bad. And people have to get up and always leave, and they go to the little back car of any car. They go all the way to the back and just smoke away. That is my comment.
Well, Mr. Watts, I want to thank you for coming before us. I'm sorry to hear, some of the comments, but we really appreciate you coming before us and your honesty and sharing this information. I do want to say that we're going to assign Mr. Donald Bonds, who's a Chief Transit Officer, to work with you and to further look into these things, which are, bothersome, I have to tell you, especially with regards to the smoking and then people having to walk so much. So thank you again. And we will be following up with this, and Donald Bonds will be working with you directly.
I really appreciate the concern and the interfacing with the public. I would be glad. I've had a ton of solutions to be able to help the CTA and never have had an opportunity to put them in place.
Well, we appreciate you taking this opportunity. It's important information for us to know.
Thank you so very much. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watts, for contacting us.
Thank you, Mr. Longini.
Oh, you're welcome, sir. And
have a blessed day.
Thank you very much, sir. That's all that we have for public comment today.
That's all that we have today, then?
This way, nobody else, just that one.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd like to ask the board for the opportunity to not follow the regular agenda that we have. I'm going to move it around a little bit and move new business as the next part on the agenda, just because one of our board members has to leave a little bit early. And as part of new business, I have some unfortunate business to share, I think, publicly. Unfortunate for us at the CTA, but I think very fortunate for the county. So unless anyone has any objections, I'm going to go right into it. So Judge Chevrolet has informed us that she is going to unfortunately be leaving the CTA. And I have to tell you, as a director, she's been such a wonderful asset. And for me, it was great to hear. I believe she is the first director that has been on that had previously worked for the CTA and uses the CTA every day, like many of us. But she worked for the CTA before, so it's come full circle that she was on the board. She does not want to leave. I know she will express that in a second, and we don't want her to leave. Her great leadership skills and her expertise and experience as a judge, were wonderful for us to have. But she has been called upon, to sort of serve in another capacity that I think will be so helpful to so many people. She will be working for Senator Iris Martinez, who currently is the Cook County Circuit Court clerk-elect. And she will be having a very, very important position there as Senior Policy Advisor, Associate Clerk for all of court operations. I hope I'm saying that correctly because it's quite a mouthful. And I've got to tell you, Judge Chevrolet, I've known you for so many years. You're such an exemplary leader. You've done so much work in the court system and in the community as a whole, helping out the city, the Latino community, et cetera, women, it's going to be a great loss for us. But as I mentioned earlier, you never really leave the CTA. So we know that we will be hearing from you and that you will always be, a part of the work that is done here. But you will be greatly missed. I would love for you to maybe just share a little bit of what you will be doing in your new role.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. It is with sadness and regret that I have to step aside from my role as a board member for the Chicago Transit Authority. I believe I made a little bit of history in that I was the only person that has ever been appointed to this board that had previously been an employee of the Chicago Transit Authority. I think that gave me some experience. It gave, I think, the board a different perspective based on the institutional knowledge and history that I brought to the board. The fact that I am a very vocal advocate for public transit. I use it almost every day. I live right by the Brown Line and get on the train almost every day. And I am certainly going to miss being an advocate for riders on the board and an advocate for the taxpayers, the ratepayers, the fare payers, and everybody else that uses the board, the citizens of Chicago and Cook County. But I leave knowing that I'm going to serve the people of Cook County in a different capacity. The clerk of the circuit court has been an office that for many, many years has fallen behind the times in terms of technology and the delivery of court services to its users, litigants, the judges, the entire criminal justice system, and the civil trial system. And I look forward to that challenge and that new phase of my life. So I am going to miss all of you. I'm going to miss the camaraderie. I'm going to miss the fact that I was in a position here to make an impact in terms of keeping the CTA, the world-class public transit system that it is. But I know from working with all of you for the past little over 1 year that it is in great hands, in good hands with people that are devoted to the delivery of clean, safe, and excellent, a level of excellence in public service that I haven't seen anywhere else. And everywhere I go in this country, I make it a point to use this public transit system to see how we compare with them. And there is nothing like ours. I believe the cleanest, the safest, the most reliable in terms of its timetable and service. And I just hope it stays that way. And I know it will with all of you. And friendships here always last forever. I hope that it stays that way. And I look forward to serving the people of Cook County in a little different capacity. And thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you. I know you heard a lot of our private comments earlier. I'm not sure if any of the other directors would like to say something again, because I know we all said a lot earlier.
The hour is getting a little late for everybody, I think. This is one of those rare afternoon board meetings. So I appreciate the fact that you indulged me this much.
No, thank you. President Dorval Carter, do you want to say anything else?
Sure. I thought I at least have to say something before Judge Chevrolet leaves, because her connection with CTA is very much tied to my connection with CTA. And I remember first meeting the judge when I was a staff attorney here at CTA, really just starting off my career. I can honestly tell you that neither one of us would have imagined that either of us would have been in the positions we're in today involving CTA. And so it's been an honor and a pleasure to not only have worked with her early in her career when she was a executive here at CTA, but also get the opportunity to work with her again as a board member and to see the same passion and commitment to excellence as it relates to CTA that she had, over almost 30 years ago. So, Judge Chevrolet, I wish you nothing but the best. I look forward to seeing all the great things you're going to do in the court system. And as I indicated to you earlier, you're always welcome back here at CTA because you will always be a part of the CTA family.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks for moving the agenda around to allow me to fulfill another commitment that I have at 5 o'clock today. I really appreciate it. I love you all. I will miss you all. Thank you.
Thank you. We love you.
Thank you, Judge. We'll miss you.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks for allowing that. I really appreciate that. So our next order of business today is the approval of the October 21st, 2020 business board minutes. The minutes were previously distributed to everyone. I would now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of October 21st, 2020.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Director Irvine. Director Irvine.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. A second, please.
That's okay. Yes, minutes. I'm not sure Judge Chevrolet, is she still here or not? Judge, you may have already walked away. That's fine.
I think she logged out.
That's fine. That's fine. We do not need that vote. Well, let me mark it down here that she did not vote. No. All right, Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Silva?
Yes.
Director Alvarez?
Yes.
The motion to approve the minutes passes with 5 yes votes.
Thank you, Greg. Our next order of business is executive session. It is my understanding, Karen, that there is no executive session today.
That's correct, Vice Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karen. And then we'll move on to our next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Silva.
The Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this afternoon via Zoom video teleconference. The committee approved the October 21st, 2020 minutes. The committee reviewed the finance report. The committee also reviewed the following 9 ordinances. An ordinance amending Ordinance 019-103 approving the fiscal year 2020-2024 capital improvement program. An ordinance adopting a budget for calendar year 2021 and financial plan for calendar years 2022 to 2023. An ordinance approving the fiscal years 2021-2025 capital improvement program, and authorizing the filing and execution of grant and cooperative agreements and amendments and related materials. An ordinance authorizing the treasurer to execute a natural gas contract. An ordinance authorizing a master license agreement with New Singular Wireless, PCS, LLC, doing business as AT&T Mobility to install, operate, and maintain wireless communication equipment on Design Authority properties. An ordinance authorizing a license agreement with Smash Interactive PK LLC for property located at 2500-2600 South State Street, Chicago, Illinois, Green Line. An ordinance authorizing a third amendment to an antenna site license agreement with CRECO COCO Orrington Owner LLC for the operation of the authority's communication equipment located at 1603 Orrington Avenue, Evanston, Illinois. An ordinance authorizing an agreement with Norfolk Southern Railway Company for preliminary engineering services for the Red Line Extension project. An ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Cook County Assessor's Office to access geographic information system data. The committee also reviewed 7 purchases and sales award recommendations. The committee approved all items and recommends board approval of all items. The committee placed all 9 ordinances and all 7 contracts on the omnibus. And that concludes my report, Chairman Alba Rosales.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Silva?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Jakes, seconded by Director Irvine. I will now take a roll call vote. Director Irvine?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Silva?
Yes.
Chairman Alva Rosales?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thank you, Greg. Our next order of business is the construction report. We will now hear from Bill Mooney.
Good afternoon again. I'm Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. We'll start today where we normally do, our Your New Blue Signals project between Jefferson Park and O'Hare. If we can advance to slide 3, please, Herb. So since we last met, we've had kind of 2 significant milestones on this project. The project does remain on budget and tight to schedule, but we did fully cut over our first relay house at Jefferson Park. Over the last couple of months, I've shown you the progress around that work. We have a fully functional new signal house there that's operating that interlocking for us. We also received delivery of our second relay house, which is at Foster Avenue, just north of or railroad west of that current Jefferson Park station. And this relay house is actually in the process of being wired up for cutover as kind of we've been talking. We can move forward to the pictures. So on this first slide, I'm showing you the new relay house at Foster being delivered. It was craned on from the highway. It's a fairly large piece of equipment that's actually got set between the tracks right off the bridge. And next picture, please. And here's the relay house in place at this point in time. And you can see it in relationship to some other equipment that's out there. This is the inside of the relay house. So once the house has been set, we actually bring in a series of cables from all the field apparatuses that I've been showing you over the past couple months where we did all that underground work. This then actually gets wired into this rack, and then wires from that rack go to various pieces of equipment in the house. And that's how we communicate to the equipment in the field from that house. Next picture, please. And this is the new Jefferson Park, what they call the local control panel. So this is how we actually operate the interlocking at Jefferson Park, is those buttons and switches activate different pieces of equipment and allow the trains to cross paths or go normal in the normal directions depending on kind of what's going on in the field at that point in time. My next project is our Logan Square Station Rehab project. So our focus has been on the elevator installation, which I'm happy to say that elevator number 2 has been fully installed, and we're in the process of putting it in service as we speak. If you can move forward to the slides, please. Here's that new elevator. This is the street to mezzanine elevator. We'd previously done the mezzanine to platform 1. Next slide, please. I think you can also note kind of what a difference the interior of this new unit is. And I'll also call out the floor. We've talked a couple times about the new style floor we're doing, where it's kind of an epoxy that gets laid up the sides to create an impermeable membrane for water and other fluids that may end up on the floor. But it's a wonderful improvement for that unit. At this point, I'll ask Juan Pablo to join me and close out that project.
Bill, directors, the goal for this work order was set at 30%. The prime committed to a 30.21% and is on track to exceed their commitment.
Okay. Thank you, Juan Pablo. So my next project is our electric bus charging station project. I'm really happy to report here that we have the technology that we're using, which is the first to be used in this nation, has received its UL certification. And we have turned over the equipment at Chicago Garage and Chicago Austin to operations to begin training both for operation and maintenance personnel to be able to start using that equipment in the new e-bus fleet. That leaves the remaining site at Navy Pier, the primary focus. And if we can move forward to the pictures, please. Next slide. So over the last month, they have finished exterior work to the facility, and we've moved kind of predominantly to the interior. So on the right, you can see kind of the finishing of that masonry that has been installed over the last couple months. That charcoal gray mix that will ultimately be the architectural features of this facility. And on the left, you can see the beginning that we've started to receive the industrial grade electrical equipment that will be used to convert the ComEd energy to the apparatuses that ultimately charge the buses in the field that I've shown you at some of the other locations. Next slide, please. Here is actually some of the technology that I've talked about. This is the charging station equipment where we take the ComEd power and ultimately convert it into the power we will push out to the bus. This is very similar to what we do with our third rail traction power. And on the right is actually some landscaping that they've already begun kind of enhancing the landscaping around the facility now that all that major infrastructure work is done. Next slide, please. And here you can see the final kind of completed exterior look of the building kind of set back. The building is watertight and all that activity is now interior to the building. So. My next project is our transformer replacement project. Since we last talked, all the focused activity has been at Edmonds Substation, which is up near Jefferson Park on the blue line. Can we move to the pictures, please? And this first picture here, we have completed the full installation of what we call transformer number 1. Transformer number 2 is in progress at this point. In this photo, it's being craned into the substation. The substation is actually kind of wedged in this peculiar spot off the edge of the highway, and this is access from the adjacent property. This was craned into the back of the facility. Next slide. And here they're actually terminating new traction power cables. So from that piece of equipment I showed you what we craned in, they actually pull cable then from there back into the facility itself. I would call out Director Silva. You asked about the traction power cables, what they were on one of the contracts earlier. This big black thick cable in this picture is actually the type of cable we would be buying under those blanket contracts. It would just be for maintenance purposes. So
thank you, William.
And we can move on to our next project, which is our 98th Rail Shop Bridge Deck project. This project's moving forward very fast and very well. It's actually been a wonderful little project to watch develop and go. We've completed activities last month on what was the west side of the bridge. Now we moved mostly to the east side of the bridge in this last month of activity. So we can move forward to the slides. Similar to what you saw, as I've talked previously, we had bisected the bridge, and all the work has been on the east side where we demoed out the original concrete topping deck. Next slide, please. And then we removed all the underlying steel. Right. Move to the next slide, please. And installed new steel underneath it, as you can see in this photo. Next slide, please. And then we ultimately started installing the new grading deck for that side. Next slide. And then we've started installing the new canopy that goes over it. Now, Director Irvine, you did ask last month about the topping surface, and I would call out, if you look kind of on the left side of this photo, you'll see some of the metal plating that goes on top of that grading to create the smooth, accessible surface for the shop itself. It's actually kind of being used as a pathway there. That ultimately the deck gets all that grading across it. So, next slide,
Thanks,
please.
Bill. And
then here they're starting to put on the decking for that topping there. Ultimately, which will have a roof and gets lighting and other aspects to it. And can we move to the next slide? And as part of this project, there's a series of enclosures for the building itself that get repaired. So it gets new doors overhead as well as adjacent man doors for the entranceway for that bridge deck itself. The concrete column supports have been rehabbed as part of the project. Next slide, please. And then we do a bunch of masonry work throughout that site. So as the bridge deck experienced water damage over time, that water ran down the exterior of the facility and caused some damage to that exterior brickwork and the windows. And we're replacing most of those windows and brickwork as part of this project as one of the kind of enhancements. This is at ground level below the bridge deck there. My last project for you today is our Ravenswood Ballast Phase 2 work. This was part of our Fast Tracks program, was a rather quick moving project with 3 major outages tied to it. All the work has been completed to date. And if we move forward to the photos, I can show you some of the photos from the last weekend of outage. In this photo, they are doing what we call thermite rail welding, where we connect 2 pieces of the running rail by, they call it shooting a new weld, where we actually pour in molten steel in between the 2 pieces to form a continuous connection from them. It allows for a more smooth operation and a better piece of maintained track in the long term for both our customers and for us to be able to handle. Next slide, please. In this picture, they're using what we call a tamper. This machine actually picks up the ballasted track and compresses stone around the ties, the wood ties, and can help adjust the alignment. It makes a solid pathway for the train to travel on. It's much smoother. And whenever we do major tie renewal like we did on this project, you actually have to tamp and line the track afterwards to stabilize it. Next slide. And this is a completed Kedzie grade crossing. So this was a concrete tub installation, which will provide us a longevity on this major route. This is a very heavily traveled street in this area. And that grade crossing sees a lot of abuse from trucks and vehicles alike. And so this will be a very durable product that will serve us well for the future. And here's a different look from that. And with that, I would actually turn it over to Juan Pablo again, as this will be the last time I'll be reporting on this project.
Thanks again, Bill. Directors, the goal for this work order was set at 20%. The prime committed at 20.19% is on track to meet that commitment.
So Vice Chair, that concludes my portion of the report at this time.
Great, thank you, Bill. I have a quick question regarding Navy Pier electrical charging stations. When is that project going to be completed?
We're looking at the end of the year.
End of the year, okay.
Right around the corner.
Great, thanks. And Juan Pablo, with regards to the elevators, who was the prime on that? The elevator.
Logan Square.
Yeah.
Bill, do you have the prime?
Who was that?
It was Paul Borg.
Curious on that.
The elevators themselves, Vice Chair, were actually installed by Anderson, our third-party elevator contractor. So we actually split the contract into 2 parts. I'm sorry, actually it was John Burns was the primary contractor on the station rehab. And then we contracted to Anderson to do the elevators separately.
So Anderson was the one with 30%?
No, that was John Burns, Director.
That was John Burns. Okay, got it. Just curious about that. I'll go through and ask if any of the other directors, Reverend Jakes, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Reverend John Miller, John, any questions?
No questions. Thanks.
Director Irvine,
No questions, thanks.
Director Silva.
No questions.
No questions. Okay, great. Thank you for your presentation to the two of you. Now I'd like to ask Chris Bruchel to make a presentation on the RPM project.
Good afternoon, directors. The RPM Phase 1 design build contract remains on budget and tight to schedule. We have seen COVID impacts on this project, although we are working closely with the contractor to manage them. Go to the next slide. So it continues to be very much a design project. In the primary design area, we are at approximately 70%, so we're advancing with the completion of the design, or moving towards the completion of the design. On the signal side of it, it is roughly 40 to 45%. So it is lagging a little bit behind the main design, but still, generally speaking, in harmony with the rest of the work. The construction that is going on in the bypass, we are in the process of installing structural steel and continuing with various rehab of existing structure out there. You'll see some more photographs and details later. In terms of corridor signal improvements, we continue with the testing and actually are installing further test sites here shortly. Pre-stage work is really a focus right now. We are, as you know, in the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr segment, installing a signal system that will enable us, in conjunction with two interlockings that you saw photographs of over the course of the spring and summer. We're now installing the signaling system on top of that, and that infrastructure in turn will enable us to build the major bridges in the LBMM segment. If we can go to the next slide. So temporary stations as well, when we go into two-track operation as part of the LBMM segment through that area, we will have temporary stations in two locations. You see here the Bryn Mawr temporary stairs that will be associated with a side-loaded platform in that area. Next, please. This is work at the other temporary station in the area of Argyle. Next. So pre-stage signals. So we've seen many pictures of interlockings going in and heavy track work over the course of the summer. Now, once that heavy civil work is done, we're coming in and installing the signaling infrastructure. As you've seen both in Bill's Blue Line Signal project, as well as here, we're in the process of installing these relay houses. The relay houses really hold all of the processing equipment associated with train speed and occupancy in various areas, and making sure in general that we have safe operation, safe separation between the trains that are operating on the right of way. Next. The Thorndale Relay House. So now you've seen 4 houses being set. So we are complete with the installation of those, with the installation of the actual houses. Again, similar to Bill's job, we're currently running cabling and connecting them and doing all kinds of testing and commissioning that typically follows this kind of installation. So it's interesting to see these two projects now running in tandem in this regard. That is the Blue Line Signal and RPM. Advanced contracts are really in closeout. There isn't much to talk about here. Most of the utility work that remains is really communications work, running cabling, switching over services in coordination with customers and local elected officials. No major issues as this wraps up. Nothing really to report here. We can go to community outreach, where there actually is quite a bit to report. So we have done a series of, we continue to do public outreach meetings virtually. We've had some good success with a number of them and good turnout. We have met most recently on the Granville interlocking. This is an interlocking just to the north of the Thorndale interlocking, which is the new one. The Granville is the older version of Thorndale, which we took apart half of it last weekend. We're taking apart the other part of it this weekend. And this part of the community, because it's sort of outside a a little bit of the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr segment, or more in the corridor signal improvements area, hasn't seen a lot of work. So we did a community meeting up there with the aldermen just to make sure that everyone was on top of any impacts that they would experience during this. We're doing some virtual office hours as indicated in here. And otherwise working very closely with JP and diversity on all sorts of workforce SB, DB outreach as well, that I'll turn it over to him to cover that.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon again, directors. We continue to host our monthly DBE and workforce compliance and outreach meetings with the Prime. We are finalizing plans for our final outreach of the year for our PM. On October 16th, we hosted another Construction Talks webinar with the bricklayers and allied craft workers, where we toured their apprentice training facility and fielded questions from individuals interested in a career in construction. That concludes my portion of the report. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, just a comment, not so many questions, but just to thank you for all the hard work that you're doing on this project, and really all of the community outreach. President Carter, I was going to mention that after today's county meeting, I know we're going to be following up, but it would be great to elaborate on all the community outreach work that we do, with regards to the projects that we have ongoing. I think based on the comments I heard today, I think it would be important for them to know, about all this work. It just seems very important to include that.
I agree. One of the things I will be highlighting are all the programs, particularly the workforce development programs that we've created around RPM, and not only are utilizing for CTA, but also leveraging with other, governmental projects that are occurring within the region. So I'll make sure that this information gets incorporated into that letter.
Mm-hmm. And our diversity numbers as well.
Yes.
Not sure if any of the other directors have any questions. Director Jakes, do you have any other questions?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions. Where am I at?
Thank you. Director Irvine?
No questions. Thanks, Chris.
And Director Silva?
No questions.
No further questions. Thank you, Chris and Juan Pablo. Thank you for that information. And since we have already dealt with our new business, unless anyone has any other new business to bring before us today, I don't think anyone has. I'll wait for a second to hear if anybody does. But with no further business to come before the board, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second.
Motion to adjourn, moved by Director Jake, seconded by Director Irvine. I'll now take a roll call vote. Director Irvine?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Silva?
Yes.
Chairman Alvaro Rosales?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yes votes, Chairman Alvaro Rosales.
All right. Well, I think we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.